All right, sounds good. I'm going to get going here. We got a lot to go over. I think today you're going to hear something that you haven't heard before. That's my goal for you today. Interesting, last night I actually was in Armour. I live at Lake Preston, so that's 2 hours from home. And I was working with a family last night in Armour, so 2 hours at home, 3 hours to here today. And that's how passionate I am about working with farmers and ranchers. What I put out there in terms of sacrifice my family to help others, ask my wife. She says I'm working too hard at this, but that's the job that needs to be done. But nonetheless, on the way home last night, you know, it's dark. It was after 9 o'clock, and you need something to listen to. So I actually looked up some YouTube audios on farm transition and succession. I was just curious what was out there, because I really hadn't listened to anything like that in a long time. And after 2 hours of that stuff last night, they didn't say one solution, not one solution in 2 hours. They did a great job of identifying the challenge, and what we have to go through, but not once was there one solution. I'm going to give you solutions today. I fully intend to give you solutions today on what we can do, we can deploy. You'll still have to do it, but I'm going to tell you how to approach some of this stuff, and it's going to be different from what you've heard before. Actually, this is the first presentation anybody's heard this stuff to the level you're in here today. And I intend to be very passionate about it, and I intend to be some aha moments for you. I really believe that's going to happen. Okay, ready to go? Could I get a bottle of water by any chance? No, thank you.
The clicker's up there first.
All right.
You want to use it?
Yeah, where's it? Okay.
Forward, back. Here's this
Okay.
pointer right there.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. Want to open it?
Yep.
All right. So first of all, what is Key Farmers Farming Program? Here's the agenda. We're going to talk about what we've learned to understand who we are and who we are not. There's a segment when I'm going to ask you who we are. I'm a farmer and rancher too, by the way. So I say we, I'm talking about me as well. I farm and ranch by Lake Preston. Anybody here know me by any chance? Well, it's better to be at home. It's hard to speak at home because everybody knows you, right? All right, so if you know, I have a cattle operation with my son, Blake. Blake runs our operation. I work for Blake. How many fathers in here can say they work for their children? You don't have to raise your hand. I'm proud of that, actually, guys. I'm proud of that. I'm not saying it was easy. I could have been one of the worst ones at transition, but I'm proud of the fact that Blake runs our operation, no question. I'm not saying it was easy to get there, but I'm proud of it today. All right. Provide specific detail on how to message through the wealth transfer process. I'm going to give you specific detail today. Estate planning as well as farm and ranch transition. And if we have time, we'll have a few questions. Yeah, let's go here. All right. So as of January 1st, 2025, I'm no longer an employee of a bank, which was First Dakota National Bank. I'm an employee of the South Dakota Ag Foundation. This was transitioned to the foundation for one purpose, not to figure out what to do. We know what to do to help farms and ranches, but I need more people. By being at the foundation, it allows multiple banks and organizations to contribute funding so we can add people to this cause. This thing is not going down. The need and demand is going up. The number of calls that I get today far exceeds what I was getting 11 years ago. I think it has to do with the baby boomers and what's going on. We're getting older, right? Things are changing. And the younger generation's coming up. And guess what? They're not as patient as we were, and they're smarter than we were, whether we want to admit it or not. But again, that's kudos to the parents because we helped you be who you are today. It's very, very important. So to date, I've worked with 278 estate plans. I've settled several estates. That meeting in Armour last night was all about estate settlement. 89-year-old mother, 3 60-year-old children that thought they knew it all. I had to tell them it's your mother's to give, it's not yours to take, and we had to get through that last night. Very important point. Remember, if it's yours to give, it's yours to give, it's nobody's to take. Yours to give. How you receive matters. It really does. Transition planning. How do we bring the kids into the operation? I will say agriculture has never went through this kind of transition before. And that's why people don't know where to start. And we'll get into more of that later in the presentation. And I'll prove that to you. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing you got to prove it. The Agri-Excellence Program is a program we just work on everything from the transition, entity development, partnerships, LLCs, whatever we need to do because it fits the vision of the operation. Very important. And so today, totally, in 11 years, I worked with 398 operations, not just South Dakota, from Billings, Montana, to Omaha, to Des Moines. My wife is a saint. She's the one that's had to sacrifice. I haven't gone a lot. Okay, so what we are not. I am a consultant for you, not being influenced by anyone or any organization. I don't sell anything, guys. I don't sell any life insurance. I don't sell any investments. These are just tools. I am a certified estate planner. But I work with farmers and ranchers across South Dakota. Today, we're going to get more focus on South Dakota because the governor has stepped up, the governor's office stepped up, and put in $200,000 into the program. So that's going to give us South Dakota focus. I'm not a threat to anyone, and the only threat we have is what? Anxiety. All right, today, my goal is to try to give some level of clarity to the estate planning and generational transition process. And the question is, does it really have to be this difficult? And the answer is yes. Accept that it is difficult. Don't think that you're special or there's something wrong with you if you're struggling with this, guys. It is this difficult. Accept that. It's this difficult. And the reason why, and I mentioned it earlier, agriculture has never went through this kind of transition before. That's why. That's why people don't know what to do and where to start. And by the way, there's a lot of us in here. Are we the same? There's a lot of variability in people in here, right? There is. And there's variability in operations. There's variability in complexity of your business. There's just so much variability. How do you hone all that into one cookie cutter process? You don't. There's a certain amount of customization that's got to be done with each and every farm. It really does. So it is that difficult. Accept that it is. Therefore, we're not trying to think there's something wrong with us. All right. Excuse me. But because of the, well, that sounds better already. But because of the variability in people and variability in operations and complexity, I had to develop some disciplines that I felt were normal between all of us. And they just are. They are normal between all of us, to try to find a constant to work with. So first and foremost, the place we start with any transition or any type of estate planning is going to be the vision. I always knew vision was important. I think you do too. We hear about organizations working on their vision statement all the time, right? You ever just wonder why? Why do we have to have a vision statement? What is it? Why do people spend so much time on vision? So I've been preaching for 10 years how important vision is. Then it happened to me in May of 2024 in Billings, Montana. I was working with a family out there. I had 12 family members coming into a motel room on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. At 1:45, I'm in the conference room and I'm writing on this flip chart, and I wrote the word vision at the top of the one page, and I just sat back on the table. I was looking at it, trying to figure out what can I say that's going to be impactful enough that this family is going to understand why creating a vision, or at least getting the vision transparent, is so important to figure out where we're going. I've been working with them 8 months and I couldn't see the vision. I couldn't figure out where we're going. Then all of a sudden the motel door opened and a staff worker walked in just to check the coffee, a little flame at the bottom, you know, and looked at it and then turned around, looked at my chart and said, vision. In the Bible it says, without vision we shall perish, and he walked out. If that's not a divine moment on how important vision is, what is? I never looked at that word again like I used to. I looked at it totally different after that point. Every operation we're talking about vision. If I had somebody here marking down today how many times I used the word vision, you'd be amazed. But it all comes back to that moment. What is the vision? Because if you have a vision, that you're working towards, you become very inspired by that vision. It helps you with your estate planning. It helps you with your transition work. It helps you with everything. Because you know why? It puts you on offense. I'm a linebacker from South Dakota State. I played there. I like defense. This is the one time I like offense. I'm a Jack Lambert fan. What did he say? Remember him from Steelers? All quarterbacks should wear dresses. Remember that? That's my mindset from a linebacker, but anyway. So, discipline number one when I'm working with somebody, I'm trying to see and listen for, is there any level of vision there? What is it? What is it? If not, we're going to work on that because it's very, very important. Okay. Number two, and I said this earlier, it's yours to give, it's nobody's to take. But give it. We can't take it with us. There's two examples of when things get taken from us. What are they, guys? If we get upside down with the bank, what happens? They like to take, right? Let's face the facts. That's the way it is. What's the other time? Taxes, there you go. But when we pass, everything's taken from us, right? So give it. Give it. But give it towards a vision that you believe in, that you're inspired in. And guess what? That will align with the goals of the next generation. What is the vision? Very, very important. And by the way, it is about receiving. Next generation, how you receive matters. Let me give you an example. There's an operation, Central South Dakota, I've worked with for 4 years, four and a half years. And the parents, when we first put that partnership together, actually that was about 8 years ago, put the partnership together, and I got called back in 4 years after that. They were still giving to these two sons, huge feedlot operations, and the amount of wealth that's been generated within that group collectively is huge. Those two sons would not be where they are if those parents were not so giving. But when I got called back in, the parents had quit giving. They quit giving because the boys were taking. And I think Dad's quote is best. I am so tired of the lack of respect and the lack of appreciation of everything that their mother and I have done. I'm ready to put the whole thing on the sale block and just sell it, and they can be there and bidding on it just like anybody else. I said, no, you won't. He said, I know I won't. He said, that's how I feel. And that has everything to do with how the receiving is going on. What do you think happened to the giving in that case? It dried up. They weren't given anymore. Very successful operation. The buying power of that operation is incredible. But we got to get the receiving right. Very, very important. Giving and receiving, there's no room for taking. All right, I think you'll find this interesting. Mental focus and mindset. Is anybody here really like legacy? Like the word legacy? I mean, it's in my title. I don't know how crazy I am about it anymore, but legacy. Looking back, yeah, it's okay. We all want to look back. Our operation started with 10 cows and $25,000 in 1992. We're at 450 registered cows today. We lease 1,000 acres in South Dakota from the SDSU Foundation in Miller. We got a 1,500 head feedlot by Lake Preston. We've come a long way since 1992, and it hasn't been easy. So we talk about that. We're not focused on that anymore. Blake certainly isn't. He's driving this business. But there are people that are really focused on their legacy. All right, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to understand what that means. So legacy, if you're inspired by your legacy, chances are many of them won't plan for the future. Example, there's a family I worked with just north of Huron. I signed them up 2 weeks ago. And the mother sat there at the table and she said to me, I love my father-in-law. He's a great man. But he holds his cards, and she's in her 60s, early 60s. He holds his cards so close to his chest, he won't tell us nothing. He won't tell us nothing. I got our children, 2 of our children that wish to come back to the farm and be part of this operation. How can they plan if we don't even own our house today? How could they plan if we don't know what his plans are? How can we? And all he wants to do is sit around and talk about the past. And so he's inspired by his legacy. For whatever reason, he is. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just what is. So when I'm working with families, I'm looking for these things. What's going on? So he's inspired, and therefore he's not planning for the future. He's not. And the next thing, the vision. If you're inspired and consumed by your vision, guess what? You could miss today. I can be guilty of that. I like getting out there, guys. I like getting out there that I can be getting out there so much that I miss what's going on today. It can happen, no question. And guess what? If you're extremely focused on today, you may be in some type of survival mode. Where do you think that mother was in these three? Can we agree she was focused on today? She's in survival mode? Yeah. So within any family, you can have all three of these things going on. And what she was saying is, if Dad isn't willing to have some kind of help us with the vision of the future, which, by the way, Dad doesn't know what the vision of the future is. That's part of the solution. What is the vision of the future with our children so we can share that with the dad, so maybe we can get some of that legacy focus towards the vision. Actually, guys, that will give him peace. And so there becomes our homework and how we approach this. And we're going to start with strategic planning is how we're going to approach this situation. But all these things are going on within any family. To what degree is what we'll find out. So when people say transition is just about buying a life insurance policy or doing this so we got the capital there to buy out the non-farm children, guys, it's way deeper than that. If it was that easy, we wouldn't have a problem today. It's way, way deeper than that. Way deeper. People are looking for peace. I can guarantee you that grandfather, that legacy is so important to him. He doesn't want it to end. He just doesn't know how to go forward. What was the first thing she wanted me to know? How nice a guy this is. I love my father-in-law. I haven't met the father-in-law yet. But that's not a bad introduction. I'll take it. All right. Some perspective I'm looking when I'm talking to the operations those first times around. First of all, this is a process over a period of time. It is not a moment. We didn't get to this situation overnight, guys. Don't think we're going to fix it overnight. It takes time because there's a culture that develops. There's decisions that need to be made. And there's a lot of information that has to be developed so people can begin to get involved in the transition the right way. Yes, it impacts estate planning, but it impacts the farm and ranch transition as they're trying to work together to move these operations forward. Very, very important. Don't try to make it a moment. Interesting, I'll get this question a lot of times, right, when I get in there. How long is this going to take? My answer is, I don't know. I've got one operation I'm involved in now for 8.5 years. That's not a negative. We went from no structure to structure that operation is so offensive today. They're keeping me around to slow them down. I become their checks and balances to help them understand you guys just think to get away from, but it's just how offensive they are today because of all this work we've done. And we'll get into the percentages a little later about the challenges that you're really up against. So I don't know. But I will commit to everybody. My goal is always to get fired. I'm very public about that. And what that means is when they're done, let me go. There's plenty of operation. I like the beginning, not the end. I can get bored at the end. I like the beginning. And therefore, we have to find the solutions for the farms and ranches. Don't look for perfect. This whole process is very imperfect. If you look for perfect, you're going to cause imperfection. Don't look for Grandpa to be perfect and how he loosens up on that legacy. Let's just help him loosen up by helping him understand the future. Don't look for perfect. I'm not sure what perfect looks like. But you can cause imperfection, no question. Is the family committed? And will they have the courage to do the work? Will they have the courage to do the work? Very important. There's another family I worked with. I'm trying to throw these examples out here to actually help you understand what I'm talking about, courage and all these things. North of Huron, I got a call. There were 3 couples involved in an S-Corp, and they're all excited. They want to transition 2 sons into it. One couple isn't really involved but has an ownership, owns some shares. The other 2 are very involved. So we had this family meeting, everybody together, and the 3 couples were talking, very relaxed and everything else. But the 2 people they wanted to transition in, those 2 sons were sitting there. And I couldn't tell if they were engaged. They certainly never said a word. For all I knew, they were a little introverted. I didn't know because nobody said a thing. So at the end of the meeting, we had a great meeting. They said, what's our next step? I said, I think for me, it'd be great just to have some one-offs. I'd like to meet with the two younger guys here, get to know them a little bit, I just need that. And so I did that. Well, when I got to be with those two, they weren't introverted at all. They were very open, they had a cup of coffee for me. We sat down, they could talk, no problem. But what they said was, the vision of our parents is not what we want. Those three couples had it all figured out how they're going to pull these two sons in and what it was going to look like. And when you listen to those two sons, which were cousins, you had to agree with them. What they wanted was going to work. What the parents wanted was not going to work. Of course, they said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go tell them. They said, how's that going to go? I said, I think they're going to find peace with it because I think they already know it. They already know it, but I don't think the communication is here that would allow you to tell them. So we did that. And it was interesting. The comment that came out of one of the dad's mouths said, he just laughed. He said, that makes so much sense. We knew it, but we weren't willing to recognize it, and we knew it. And he said, bring them in here and tell them we're going to get on their bus. They had the courage to make the changes and support the visions of those two young men. We completed that transition in 8 months, and that was of assets and everything. Yes, there were some taxes paid, whatever, but that was their choice. 8 months. But they had the courage to jump on that bus. And they had the resources, very successful operation. But it comes back to that word. Are we going to hold on to our vision till the end, or are we going to have the courage to adapt to the future of our operation? Very important. Family leadership. Who's in a position of strength? Who's in a position of weakness? What the parents say becomes an expectation. Believe it or not, who's in a position of strength isn't all about assets. There's some bullies within the midst too. It certainly isn't me, and it's not you, it's that guy back there, right? But the point is, we got some people that have been able to push their weight around, and that's got to be, you got to figure out who those are, because we got to manage all that stuff within that family. You kind of notice there's a lot of people stuff here. Our grandparents never intended for us to go through this. That's the difference in the transition of operations today versus the past. And again, I keep saying that, and I'm going to prove it to you in a little bit. All right, proper relationship. I mentioned earlier, giving. With vision, we are inspired to give. Without vision, we feel obligated to give. Is there a difference between being inspired to do something and being obligated to do something? We're obligated to give our stuff away because we can't take it with us, right? But if we can be inspired and are planning to give it, it actually gives vision to what you're doing. Even though we're going to be gone, you'll find peace. Remember those two words. If you do something by inspiration, it feels totally different than you do something by obligation. And it's the same asset. Same asset. Very important. Receiving. Those that are receiving, be humble, be kind, be grateful, but most of all, be thankful. Those two boys in that big feedlot operations forgot that along the way somewhere. And they moved down into the taking. There's no room for taking in this stuff, guys. It's yours to give, it's nobody's to take, but then give it. Very important. And always remember, without vision, we shall perish. All right, so let's talk a little bit about estate planning. By the way, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and fire away. I'll take them at any point in time. All right, these are three things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on estate planning, but a little bit. We're going to talk about what I call the glue, the 5 pillars of estate planning, and finding peace. When I sit down with a family on estate planning, a couple, it's usually up front. My step one is the things you need to know about estate planning. We don't talk about them, their assets, their family, or anything. I've actually done that with groups and neighbors. It's just get a level of foundation of information in place. The next meetings is the confidential. That's where we do talk about the people, their families, their assets, and everything. And I'm taking down a lot of information. At the end of that, I'll tell them what it'll cost if they wish to hire me to help them with their estate plans. After that point, I'm with them at every meeting, at every attorney meeting, all the way through the process. And then indirectly end up settling estates too. But that's fine. My goal on what I'm looking for is, are they confident in what they're doing? That's how I judge my performance. When we get to the attorney level, they are very confident in what they're doing. Are prepared information sent to the attorney. The attorney's going to do their thing. They're going to question it with the client, which they need to. My role changes. It's very passive at that point. I'm with the couple there. I'm sitting there. I may not say a thing. Certain attorneys, they'll knock me off a couple times when Alan gets run over by the Budweiser truck or whatever. But that's all right. But the point is, I'm there for the client. I may say at some point, for point of clarification, I think we should talk about this, but that's the extent of my involvement at that point. You have to let the attorney do their job. I'm very respectful of the attorney position. Matter of fact, they picked up on that, so in end of February, I get to talk to a whole room full of attorneys, financial advisors, and accountants in Sioux Falls about everything outside the documents, because they should know the documents by now, right? That's humor, but they should, all right? That doesn't mean they know what farmers and ranchers are and know how we think and who we are, but that's what I'm going to talk to them about, all the stuff we just went through here. So, all right. So this is a good place to start when you talk about estate planning. When the family is young and you have young kids, the kids are in the middle of the family and the kids are the glue. Make sense? They are. Everything evolves around the kids. No question about that. As the family matures, the kids leave home and the parents become the glue that hold the family together. Off to college they go, we bring our dirty clothes home. At least I did. All right. And then come home to milk cows too. When the first parent dies, the kids at this point usually tend to rally around the surviving parent. Just like that meeting last night, those 3 children in their 60s were rallying around mom, but they were starting to try to take. But they are cared about mom, no question about it. When the second parent dies, the glue is gone. This is the most dangerous time of the estate because the glue is gone and the kids are not accountable to the parents anymore. I name this is when the stories we hear about, the battles, that's when stupidity now has permission to play because of the leadership of the parents is no longer there. So when you look at estate planning, guys, this is about the leadership of your family when you're here, but it's all about the leadership of your family when you're gone. That's what this is all about. And we need to normalize some of this stuff on estate planning and transition so people come forward that need some help so we can get them the help that they need. Very, very important. Because without that, we're going to continue to see a consolidation of farm and ranch operations. All right. So the 5 pillars of estate planning. Now, one is the estate planning documents themselves. And again, I'm not going to spend time on all this today, but these are the steps to go through. What's the difference between a will, a revocable trust, an irrevocable trust, and what applications do they have? What are the documents? The power of attorneys, medical and financial. What are the documents they should have in place? A lot of people don't know what those are, so we need to help them understand that. Asset management, whether it's managing your assets today while we're farming together. If you own them, it's yours to give. But how do we manage these assets today to keep these operations viable and moving forward? And at the end of the day, what does that look like as far as the ultimate distribution? Back to their vision and what's really important to them. Because through this, we're all looking for what? Peace. We're all looking for peace. Never underestimate the power of that word. Very important. Income and taxation. Somebody mentioned taxes. You bet there's an income and taxation piece to this too. Actually, that family last night, because of the work we did in 2019, we mitigated an $8 million federal estate tax bill that would have been due at the passing of mom. That was brilliant work. And the reason it's still going to work is we did in 2019, so the increase of the land values would have been far greater than the exemption has increased since then. So I'm glad what we did in 2019. Very important. Insurance piece. It's really about long-term care. Everybody's, let's face it, that's the real cost. My dad's in the home in Brookings today. It's $10,000 a month. So it's a real cost. And he's got the resources to pay that, but not everybody does. So we want to make sure at least we have some, focus around long-term care and what are their plans to make sure there's plans in place. Then, of course, the people side at the end of the day, that's the family. We spend time in the family too. Okay, so here's some advice for you on finding peace. There's 2 words that I don't like, and I've never used, and I'll say them once today so you know what the words are. Fair and equal is not fair. I don't know what to do with that. You know what to do with those words? It's great marketing. It's certainly got everybody's attention, but I've never found that to be useful for anything. It's just a dead end. What do you do with it? And so I'm saying it's all about finding peace. Mom and dad are looking for peace. They will find peace as they gain confidence in the decision-making of their wealth transfer that enhances the lives of all of their children, which supports the life path that each child chosen. Which gets back to vision. We didn't create the life paths of our children. Every one of our children individually decided what that's going to look like, whether it's staying here or doing something else. But you know, when I find parents that get focused on enhancing the lives of their children to support the visions that each one of them took, they're finding peace. And let that define it. Don't take the balance sheet and try to define it with a balance sheet. It doesn't, you're not finding peace with that. I call it the sweet spot. And let peace define fair. Very important. All right. Now I'm going to get to what I told you I was going to take. The top statement. Agriculture has never went through this kind of transitional challenges being experienced today. And I'm publicly making that statement, and I've been getting called out a lot, but nobody's been able to say that I'm not right. So in your minds, when should the transitional process begin? In my mind, it's in the early 30s, not 1930s, when you're 30 years, late 30s, in the early 40s. And here's why. Because you have time on your side. Time is still an asset, guys. I'm 65 going on 66. Time is more of an asset for Blake at 38 than it is for me, right? You have more time to work this stuff through. Time is critical. It's just a big deal. Time is an asset. The older we get, I'm calling it a liability. It's really not a liability, but it does drive the process. The older we get without planning, it becomes more of a moment rather than a process. Here it is. The older we get, time becomes a liability because there isn't time for what? Thought. Thought. Do you want to spend the rest of your life thinking about the success of your family and what you're doing to help your family create success, or do you want to spend the rest of your life worrying about it? It comes down to that kind of thought. We're going to have thought. How do you want to spend your time? That's the choice. Yeah, and believe me, if we don't take action, later on it becomes inaction. Because we still don't know what to do. It's just the way it is. All right, here we go. The only transitional experience that farmers and ranchers have is the transitional experience that they went through. How many times to go through this? Once. How good can we be? If the environment's changed that much from when our fathers and grandfathers transitioned, if things have changed that much, and that's the only experience we have, how do we know what to do? I'm not saying some people aren't figuring it out, but it's not easy. There's nothing easy about it at all. All right, so here's the proof in the pudding, why I'm saying we've never had this kind of experience before. So just bear with me. So transition's been an evolution for 162 years, back to when the Homestead Act, right? That's a fact. And I'm saying from the beginning through World War II, let's face it, what do we have? World War I, had the dirty 30s, we had the Great Depression. Look at all the stuff that they went through. How many farmers are just trying to survive? My grandparents moved 6 times. Was it March? You guys remember these stories. On March 1st, everybody traded farms because the banks owned them. How many of you would do that today? I don't think I would, but you know, that was normal back there. Everybody traded farms. But they were trying to survive. So I'm saying those years were the survival years. They weren't thinking about vision. They weren't thinking about transition. They were just trying to survive. I told my grandmother one time, when the lights came on, I said, man, that must have really, because she could remember right to the date and the time and everything. I said, that must have been the good old days. She said, young man, those weren't that good. They weren't that good. But they remembered everything. I have a hard time remembering what I did last Friday. Things are changing. Okay, the survival years. Next, prosperity years. Post-World War II, I'm calling it to 1969. I owned a 1948 truck with my dad, okay? Here's the story behind that truck. My grandpa bought it brand new in 1948. It's only got 49,000 miles on it. And the story was, in 1947, he wanted to buy a new car, but in order to buy a new car and get moved up on the list, post-World War II, he had to buy a truck. He had to buy a truck to get the car. So I told Dad, if I want a new car today and I got to go to town and buy a Peterbilt, that don't make any sense to me at all. He said, you have to understand, there were tons of cash back then. Agriculture was feeding the world coming out of World War II. What was the price of corn in 1947? You can Google the stuff you like. It was around $3.57 a bushel. Obviously, productivity wasn't there, but farmers were piling up cash because there wasn't anything to buy. Things were allocated, right? Agriculture was piling up cash. Post-World War II, we were feeding the world. And that's the truth. That's a fact. And so I hear stories in estate planning all the time when I'm working with older couples how Dad bought 5 ranches in 1951 or bought 4 farms in 1949 or in the 60s. You hear these. You guys probably heard some of these stories too, right? So the question is, how could they do that? They could do that because those are the prosperity years coming out of World War II. And so generally speaking, and there's outliers to this, granted, but generally speaking, the oldest got the farm. Then if somebody else wanted a farm, they go buy them one or buy them a ranch. Guess what? Transition was complete. Did they have to go through all the people stuff we got to navigate through today? No, they bought them a farm, bought them a ranch. That worked through about 1969. Okay, moving into the 70s. Into the 70s, land values were starting to go up. We started seeing expansion on farms, harvester silos. At my place, Dad expanded the dairy for us kids to come home. 1976, put up a couple harvester silos. I mean, there's all kinds of expansion. And that was borrowed money that was on what? Variable rates. What happened in the 80s? Interest rates through the roof, right? What was the messaging in the 80s? I graduated from South Dakota State in 1981. I didn't know I wasn't going to farm, but when I came home after graduation, what do you think I was told? I didn't know how bad it was, guys. They did a great job of shielding that. They said, you have a college education. You need to go out and get a job. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. I still didn't know how bad things were at the farm. So in the 80s, I worked for Land O'Lakes, milk procurement and sales. I actually bought milk from Hojer to a lot of this country, ran a lot of this country. But those weren't bad times for me. But it was bad times for a lot of farmers. You know the stories. We lost a generation in there. We were told not to come back. And yet there's other operations that had the resources that were able to really grow that time. They had the cash. Talk about cash being king, right? If cash is king, what's the kingdom? Profit. Got to have both. Got to have both. Big deal. So there really wasn't any kind of transitional experiences going on right then other than we're back into survival mode from the 70s up till about 2003. Okay, so 2004 to present. Don't get focused on a particular number. What happened with government policy and ethanol? What happened? Yeah, we had a lot of development, a lot of growth, a lot of wealth starting to be created in agriculture, land values going up, which were still going up. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. A lot of things happening. So just to transition by buying a farm or a ranch is possible for very, very few today. And so the focus is, how do we bring the kids into the operation? How do we work together? How do we deal with the complexities of people? And how do we deal with the complexities of the business? This is a transition that agriculture has never went through before. And that's why there's so many questions. Where do you start? Or when it's not going well, I need some help. Where do we reach out to get some help? I actually went to New York in August to study what they call the FarmNet program out of Cornell. It's the only consulting service in the U.S. that I could find that had any level of consulting with farmers and ranchers. It's out of Cornell in New York. I actually got to visit a 500-year-old farm. 500-year-old. That's 1723. Think about that, 1723. And they had the proclamation on the wall from the king that they were given this piece of property from the king, whoever the king was back then. And then they got burnt out with the American Indian Wars, but they grabbed that plaque when they ran out of that house. They still had that plaque with it. Just really cool. But think about what's going on. Bottom line, people don't know what to do. And we got to normalize this. We can start with a certain amount of group settings, but it gets very individualized when you get to the farm or the ranch because of the differences in people, because of the difference in the operations. Me going to the foundation, I have the knowledge to do it, but I'm not covering enough operations. We have to add consultants. That's what got the governor's office to step in. They believe so much in this story, and this was basically the PowerPoint I showed them some of these slides. They said, all right, we need to be part of this. We can give it to a nonprofit, and so they're starting. We need to add people to help with this. Okay, here's my simple transition formula. Looking back, history is important. I don't discount legacy at all, guys. I love history. I really, really do. As long as we remember history, but we also got to focus on the future. So we start with history, looking back, and I do want the families to hear about the stories. Very important. I want to hear if there's ever been an entity. Was there ever a partnership? Was there ever anything that's going on that we may need to move forward? It's great discussion. Then we move to the vision. We're going to create a vision with these operations. You know, we could get the vision wrong, and we got to tweak the vision, but it's okay, but at least we have one. If we know where we're going, we have a better chance of deploying the right strategies. If we don't know where we're going, we're throwing a lot of stuff against the wall. We need to be more focused because the swings are big. Can we agree the swings are big in agriculture today? We're about to see it. I'm a cattle guy. It's funny, we're excited about where we are today, but we're all worried about what's coming, right? It's just what it is. Corn and beans, same way. We've been there, right? Then if we get the history, get to the vision, then we can start deploying the strategy, the strategic execution. All right, step one, history, looking back. Okay, is this a journey from simple to more complex? Let's just assume each box was 2 people, not 6 people. It was mom and dad transitioning to one son and daughter-in-law or whatever. Just each box in this diagram was 2 people. So from first generation to second generation with just 2 people, yeah, that's pretty simple, right? Communication systems don't have to be that hard. The business complexity is probably not that difficult. That shouldn't be that hard to do. And then if we say third generation, we're still at 1 couple to 1 couple to 1 couple. We're going to see some business complexity change, but still, we're not talking with a lot of people. But even at that, we got a 48% chance of making it work. These aren't my percentages. These come out of Purdue. I'm just using them, but I think they're right. But frankly, in agriculture, we kind of like 48% chance, 48% odds, don't we? It feels like we can manage through that. And there's things that can happen. People pass or whatever that was part of that 48%, but 48 don't feel too bad. By the way, that 500-year-old farm I was on, it's been 2 to 2 to 2 for 12 generations until now. They finally got their spread where they have 2 children coming in. 500 years, it's always been from 1 couple to 1 couple to 1 couple. Just interesting. All right, I call this the spread. Now we go to 2 children, right? What comes next? If we're going to keep these businesses unified, what comes next? Cousins, right? Nothing wrong with that. The odds change. So from here to here, you got a 16% chance, according to Purdue, of being successful. You move down to here, it's a 4 to 6% chance of things being successful. So the question is why? Why? What happened here? There we are. The question is why? If we don't prepare for that 4 to 6 when we get down to cousins, if we don't start preparing for that when we're up there on that 16%, We're not going to be ready for that in a lot of different reasons. It could be the capacity of the business won't be big enough for it. It could be the culture. People haven't learned how to understand the business is bigger than any one of them. And we probably haven't addressed the need for individual wealth while we're building this collective wealth in an entity. We like to build equity. Can we agree on that? Anybody like equity? The banks taught us to like equity, right? And we'd rather build equity than pay our children. We can build more equity that way. And yet, children have individual needs with their families just like we all do, right? We have to recognize individual wealth and collective wealth, or it's not going to work. These are the complexities I'm talking about. So, who are we? I want you to help me with this sentence. I'm saying we are very nice, and I'll finish the sentence. Give me some words here, guys. This is your chance to wake up. Give me a word. I'm going to talk to these attorneys, and I'm going to say we're very nice. Come on, give me a word.
People.
What's that?
People.
We're very nice people. That's at the end of the sentence already. Humble. Private. Thankful. Yeah. I can come up with a lot of good words. I know you can too. But I'll finish the sentence this way. After all those words, I'm going to say conservative, rich people. That's not a political statement. But we are conservative by nature, but we're rich in equity. We're rich in equity, right? It's okay. How we drive that equity becomes the difference between those that pucker up and hold it tight and those that open it up and support the vision of their children. But you have equity. That's huge. It's what you do with it that matters. All right. So I'm calling this the haves and the have-mores. And I don't know you, so I don't know if you're a have or have-more, so I'm not going to insult anybody here, but I'm going to take these comments for what they were. Because I'm convinced we have no have-nots in agriculture. We have the haves and the have-mores. And here's why. So in Kingsbury County, where I live by Lake Preston, we had 160 acres that sold about, probably 5 weeks ago now, and it brought $1.84 million. That had a 17-acre slough on it. 3 miles from the Gevo site. I do. But also, we're on fire with dairy development and everything else, but it doesn't matter. That's what it brought. That's what the market said it's worth. So if I own 160 acres in Kingsbury County with a 17-acre slough, I'm worth at $1.84 million. Does that make me a have-not? No, I'm a have. Can't make a living off it. Right? It's just the way it is. But you have to understand who you are and amongst who we are to how you're going to navigate through these challenges. We live 3 miles from that quarter two, by the way. That's where our operation is. So that's the world that we live in. We don't look over the fence at what everybody else has. We look within ourselves to see how are we going to navigate through this challenge. Don't let it scare you. There's nothing you can do about it. It just is what it is. I can tell you the person that bought that, I figured they're worth about $229 million. That's how much land they control. And by the way, they're good friends of ours. So what can you do? Keep them good friends of yours. Right? Yeah. So cash rent off that 160 acres would be about $36,800 versus a CD, that's per year. A CD off that $1.8 million would generate about $92,000, and yet I'll buy the land too. If that ain't conservative, I don't know what is. I'm just saying that's the world that we live in. I bet there's stories here too, just like it, right? We got to quit worrying about this and figure out who we are, what's our vision, how we're going to navigate through all this. What are we going to do? Because that can really be a demotivator. Does it put any pressure on the equity of the land that we own from an estate planning standpoint? Sure it does. Gets back to what is the vision? What is the vision? Very important. Here it is. Already got back. Yeah, pretty cool. All right, step 2. Let's move into step 2. I already told you about my story out of Billings, Montana. That was impactful on me, and I hope it was impactful on you today. Always remember, without vision, we shall perish. It makes me wonder, because I travel these roads, you see farmsteads that are empty, you see a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of reasons why that could have happened, but I do wonder about the vision part. If there was some level of vision, how many of those could still be going today? I don't know, but it makes me wonder. Because in the Bible, it does say, in Proverbs, without vision, we shall perish. You can look it up. All right, so here's the 3. When we get into vision, here's kind of 3 different areas that most decisions are made. Will we keep the farm unified as it is today? That's a decision. Going to be a lot of complexity with that, but we can manage through that if you're willing to. You got to know where to start. We can manage, and that's where the complexity is. Will the farm fragment? Can be risky unless we fragment with a level of collaboration and diversification. What do those words mean? That operation I told you north of here, and they're fragmented, they're still working together on equipment. They're still working together. That's why that's going to work. We didn't need to buy an extra combine just because we're not farming together. Can we keep those levels of collaboration in place? If that's what we need to do, that supports the vision. And usually if we can get involved in these while people are still getting along, we can find those collaborations because it just makes sense. It makes sense. That's all. There's no right or wrong. I'm just saying whatever decision you make is going to have some vision around it, and we got a lot of work to do. But if we have the wrong one, we're going to waste a lot of time with the wrong strategy. It's really important we get this right up front. Yeah. So does it put the operation on offense or defense? Who wants to be on offense? It's okay, y'all do, don't you? Don't you want to be on offense? From a business standpoint? You do. You want to be on offense. You don't want to be on defense. Very important. Because here's some of the stuff, the more complex you get in these different businesses that you're going to have to deal with. And you're probably dealing with it today. I mentioned earlier, individual wealth versus collective wealth. Even though collectively we're together in business, the individual is still there. The individual family unit is there. And we have to recognize that, and we got to make sure that these are career opportunities. And we got to figure out what that looks like while we're building equity together. Very important. Depending if there's any entities in place, there's a lot of LLCs and partnerships in place out here. I know there is. I see the names of operations. It's got partnership behind it, or it's got LLC. And the difference between the two is what? FSA payment limitations versus liability. That's really what it is. Similar entities. S-corps. Got to have that discussion. Business structure for decision making and communication. Weekly, monthly meetings. I'm a big monthly meeting guy for sure. Most people got to figure it out how they communicate on a daily basis, a weekly basis. I definitely believe in an agenda. We're going to have financials on the agenda every month. We're going to have a lot of different things, but it supports the structure. Very important. Capacity of the business today. And what will the capacity of the business need to be tomorrow to support the decision that you made? Whether we're going to keep this unified or whether we're going to fragment these operations. What's it need to be? How do we increase the capacity of the business and have to compete against the have-mores? What do we need to do? What does the word diversification mean to your operation? Does it fit who you are? Some of the most successful operations that I've worked with and know have a level of diversification outside of corn, beans, and cattle or pigs. Or they're multiple. The diversification word is powerful, guys. Very, very powerful. Being able to recognize and manage the complexity of the family and business. People versus business. I'm not in the camp of splitting them up. You'll hear public speakers say, well, you got to have the people sit over here and we'll just run a business. I'm not in that camp. I'm still sleeping with my wife. Your son is sleeping with their daughter-in-law, right? I'm not in that camp to try to separate them. We collectively got to work this out. Very important. What are the cycles of the past that need to be changed to adjust to the vision of the future? Will the parents have the courage to change? Are we looking for success for all, or are we going to hold on to the past? Back to that legacy versus today versus vision. These are all the questions that need to be answered. And as they get answered, the right strategies fall into place. The big one, what financial system will be used to measure the impact on profitability of the changes that the operation is about to go through? As we pull these together, guys, we're going to be adding a lot of expense to the operation. We could be, and usually are. We better be able to measure what's going on. That's way beyond QuickBooks, Easy Farm. We need those accounting systems, but we need a system to drive that information so we can really see the impact of what's going on. I had a call last Saturday. We did, I've been working this operation 5.5 years. In 5.5 years, when they called me, they literally highly diversified operation. They just didn't know where they at. They knew they lost $1 million in earned net worth on their balance sheet, but they didn't know where. Just didn't know where. They feared the bank meetings. They had plenty of equity, but they feared the bank meetings. So we had our planning session, budget session on Friday, and the banker came in there about noon. We started at 9 o'clock. They showed them their entire plan for 2025, reviewed their 2024 plan, and he called on Saturday and he was just in tears. He said, my wife so dreaded those meetings and said, because of working with you and your program, and I said, no, it's not about me. You guys did the work. I just provided the guidance. He said, I'm ready to bring our sons into the operation. And this will be one of those 2 to 4%. Because they have cousins we're bringing in at the same time. But they have the system in place, the culture in place. I really believe we have a great chance of busting through the, percentages there. You can't buy this financial system in the market. It's not there. I just created them on Excel. Depending on their operation, pull it together so we roll it up into a scorecard so we know where we're at all the time. So where are we at on time anyway? I don't even know where we're at.
11:30, we got 20 minutes.
20 minutes? Okay, perfect. So in closing, there's a few things I want to say, and you've heard all this stuff before. We are gatherers of equity. We are gatherers of equity. And you should feel good about that, because equity is really, really important. That's who we are. That's who we are. The haves and the have-mores. Figure out who you are in all this stuff. Figure out who you are. Don't look over the fence at what somebody else has. Figure out who you are, and then how we're going to navigate the challenges that you have around us. What can you do about the have-mores? Keep them your friends. They are good people. We can't go back and undo that. It's not about that, but how can we navigate? Very important. By the way, on the have-mores, what do you think they're worried about? 2 things. What's that? Elon. Yeah. Well, federal state taxes, right? What's the other thing? Divorce. The millions come easy. I don't know if it happens here, but I see in different counties where they buy land, put their kid's name on it right away. I hope they're filing gift tax returns. I'm just saying, there's things that got to be followed here. But federal, state taxes, and divorce. And again, they're good friends of ours too. I've already told them that, by the way. Okay, it's yours to give. It's nobody's to take. Write that down. Put it on your wall. It's yours to give. It's nobody's to take. But give it. Give it in a way that supports the visions and the dreams of your kids. Do it in a way. That's the best gift. And do it at a time, it's not always about giving the asset today, but give information so people can plan for their future. If those in the 40s at least have information that they can plan, that's the greatest gift that you can give them at that stage. Give it. Always remember, in the Bible it says, without vision, we shall perish. Look at yourself. What are you inspired by? What are you inspired by? If you're inspired by your equity, and we are gatherers of equity, you will protect it. If you're inspired by your vision, you will drive your equity to support the vision, and that vision is going to be of your children to build a future. Do both. Let's not risk our equity, but how do we drive it? How do we drive it? Younger generation, you got to help with this vision. They want to know where you're going. We got to help to build that vision. Very, very important. Giving is all about inspiration or obligation, period. Same word. You're either inspired to give or you're going to feel obligated to give later. But you have to give, or it's going to be taken at the end of the day. I encourage you to give. I encourage you. When I say give of information. But be inspired. That's where you're going to find peace, guys. You're going to find peace. Very important. In closing, but most of all, peace comes from all understanding. Amen. How many times we hear that in church? And there's a lot here. This is not easy stuff. Back to the beginning of this presentation. Does it have to be this hard? Yeah. It is hard. It is hard. But as you get understanding and all this stuff, you begin to make sense out of this, and you begin to find peace, and strategies just appear. That's how you got to approach this. Life insurance policy might be one, but then that's a tool. But overall, what's your vision that gives you peace? Very important. It's my favorite picture, too. My grandson's that little guy. Somebody gave me a hard time earlier about Blake and Jennifer being married. He played football as a coyote. She played basketball as a jackrabbit. Well, he knocked down a shot 2 seconds left on Saturday. It was kind of a cool moment for his mother. So, pretty neat. Other than that, I'll sure welcome any questions, guys.